Is a vegan lifestyle morally superior?
I have to confess, I'm not a vegan. I have to confess that I think it is morally superior. I think that we live in a speciesist society, all of us do. We regard humans as being ultra special, such that cannibalism, for example, would be an absolute, total no-no. And yet, if you think about the fact that we are all evolved beings, we are cousins of all living creatures. If by any chance the intermediates between humans and other species were all living still, which they just happen to be extinct if they weren't, we would then have to decide, does this one count as human, or does this one count as human? Can we eat that one? Or is that one too human to be eaten? As it happens, we don't have to face that dilemma because the intermediates are all extinct, and therefore we can be speciesist. Have you come across this word? It's analogous to racist. When you think about something like the raging debate about abortion, and people get really very, very hot under the collar about killing a tiny, few cells human embryo because it's human. Whereas this tiny little human embryo is far less capable of feeling pain or feeling fear or feeling hurt than certainly than an adult pig or cow. And there's virtually no difference between a human embryo and a cow embryo or a pig embryo. So our morality is very, very strongly shot through with speciesism. I think my own moral position will probably be that whatever else we do, we want to reduce pain and fear. And so what I would like to see would be very, very stringent controls over farming and over slaughterhouses, over abattoirs. So that if we do go on eating animals, they should be treated kindly until the moment of death, which is not the case at the moment. They are not treated kindly, either in farms or in slaughterhouses. I think, ideally, I would like to see in the future a world in which we are all vegetarian. But as long as we're not, then I think what we should be doing is making sure that animals are treated kindly, even though it makes food more expensive.
As an evolutionary biologist, Dawkins is familiar with the concept of speciesism, yet he upholds it by suggesting that we treat animals kindly till the point of slaughter. If you hold a different standard for non-human animals on the basis of species membership, you are being speciesist. There is no differential characteristic that justifies needless slaughter and exploitation in the context of non-human animals, but not in the human context. If you think there is, name it. Humans are animals, as Dawkins knows full well, so his argument is no different than suggesting slave masters ought to be kind to their slaves. The fundamental problem is not how slaves are treated, but the fact that they are enslaved. This idea of humane animal farming is a fantasy. Not only is it economically inviable, humane slaughter is an oxymoron. Humane is defined as having or showing compassion or benevolence. There is nothing compassionate or benevolent about an inherently exploitative relationship. Dawkins dreams of a future where everyone is vegetarian, but our moral obligation to other animals exists right now. In order for this vision to come to fruition, we must take action.
Which leaves me in a very difficult moral position. I mean, I clearly, I think you have a very, very strong point when you say that anybody who eats meat has a very, very strong obligation to think seriously about it. And I don't find any very good defense. I find myself in exactly the same position as you or I would have been, well, probably you wouldn't have been, but I might have been 200 years ago, talking about, 200 years, perhaps a bit longer ago than that, talking about slavery, where somebody like Thomas Jefferson, a man of very sound ethical principles, kept slaves. It was just what one did. I mean, it was the kind of the societal norm. And so I'm a bit reminded of the Flanders and Swan song, "You Don't Eat People." Do you know that?
I'm not familiar with that one, I don't think, no.
It's Flanders and Swan, you know, with that sort of comedy duet.
Yeah.
And they had a song about a cannibal feast, and one of the young men of the society objected to eating people. He said, eating people is wrong. And so his father sort of put his arm around him and said, "No, don't be silly, son. I mean, people have always been people. If the juju hadn't meant us to eat people, he wouldn't have made us of meat." And then the final line is, "Next thing you'll be saying is we shouldn't eat animals." And then the son just roars with laughter. "Don't eat animals? What a ridiculous idea!" Well, the historical precedent of slavery, I think, is actually rather a good one, because there was a time when it was simply the norm. Everybody did it. Some people did it with gusto and relish. Other people, like Jefferson, did it reluctantly. I would have probably done it reluctantly, and I'd sort of just gone along with what society does. But I think it's extremely hard. It was hard to defend then, yet everybody did it. And that's the sort of position I find myself in now. And I think what I'd really like to see is people like you having a far greater effect upon, I would call it consciousness raising, really. Having and try to swing it round so that it becomes the societal norm not to eat meat.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what you're talking about is the pressure of social conformity. And I think we're very much a conforming animal. And it's very hard to do things sometimes against the prevailing norms, and that's why it was hard for people who had some scruples or doubts about slavery to actually imagine that they could abolish it and live without. So I think that's, we are making it more acceptable, though. I think in a way the animal movement is making progress. I mean, you can walk into any supermarket here and you'll find meat substitutes, meat alternatives, vegetarian dishes. You'll find soy milk, of course, and so on. So it's getting easier and it's getting more socially acceptable. And I think we just have to somehow get past that threshold where it won't be a difficult decision for people to make at all. It'll simply be something that they can see lots of people do, and they'll feel better doing it, and gradually it will become a thing of the past, as slavery has now become a thing of the past.
I suppose another thing might be that as it becomes socially the norm, great chefs will develop wonderful recipes. I mean, the problem with vegetarian food at the moment is a lot of it isn't very nice.
Well, it's got better, I think. It's got, I've been a vegetarian now for 35 years.
Yes.
And when I started, you could certainly have said that, and there were some dreadful things around that people ate, and I was living in Oxford, and English cooking was certainly not very good at vegetarianism. But now, we have some great restaurants in this city, for example. There's some terrific vegan restaurants as well as vegetarian, where I think, you and any other meat eater would really enjoy the food. Yeah. So we're getting to that point, I think.
Imagine being comfortable with the idea that you would have been a slave owner. I usually find honesty refreshing, but this is deeply disturbing. Most people would like to think of themselves as the type of person who would have been on the right side of history regarding human slavery. Where you stand on the issue of animal rights today is a strong indicator of whether you would have fought alongside the abolitionists 160 years ago, as Dawkins implicitly acknowledges. Of course, taste pleasure is not a justification for violence, but what if I told you that you didn't have to sacrifice taste pleasure to be vegan? As a scientist, he should know that his anecdotal experience with vegan food is not representative. Vegan food can be boring, bland, and even gross at times, but the same is true for non-vegan food. And as Peter Singer said, vegan food has come a long way. This interview was back in 2009. The market for plant-based alternatives has exploded since then. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to catch the rest of this series. If you're not vegan and would like help going vegan, check out the resources in the description box. Alright, peace out.
Yo, how when me eat them, I wonder when me eat. When me tell them say me no eat no fish, no meat now. How when me eat them, I wonder when me yam. When me tell them say that I'm a vegan man. How when me eat them, I wonder when me eat.